Today we're going to talk about ADHD. Let's do it. Hey, before we get started, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you don't miss any content that's coming out here on the channel. So one thing I've wanted to do for a while is talk about how I've managed and dealt with ADHD for as long as I can remember. A lot of you probably already know this. I've talked about it on the podcast and the meme page for a few years now. And some of you have even reached out to me about it and discussed how I've managed it. So I thought it'd be interesting to do a really short series where I talk about how I've been dealing with it, how it impacts me in the gym or just in life in general, and how I manage it. Now, I do want to say first and foremost that I'm not a doctor. I know that's not shocking. And nothing in this video is going to be intended to be medical advice for you and your family. I really just wanted to talk about the things that I experience, and hopefully it'll help a few of you, or maybe even open a few eyes as to what people deal with that manage ADHD and allow you the opportunity to think about your own personal health. My ADHD was diagnosed by a doctor well over a decade ago, and I've been under the medical care of a doctor for the last couple of years where we do routine blood work and tests just to see how it's going, and we touch base around how I'm managing it and how it's impacted me. I made the personal decision to not take any medication for it. I don't take anything like Adderall or Vyvanse or anything like that, and it's a personal choice. I would highly advise you, if you think this is something that impacts you, see a doctor, run the blood work, talk to them about what's best for you and your own health, and make your own personal individual choices. Now, with all that out of the way, what I thought I'd do today is just outline and talk about how ADHD impacts me when I don't manage it, and then talk about some of the ways that I do manage it. I'm going to break it out into pros and cons. ADHD for me presents itself in a number of ways. On the pro side, or the positive sides of it, is it gives myself hyper creativity, which shouldn't be a shock to most of you if you followed me for any amount of time. And it also gives me early morning focus. So it allows me to wake up early, really focus in tightly around the things I want to accomplish, whether it's at work or through social media, or even this channel for that matter, and sketch out what I'm looking to do and create a lot of content. It also allows me to be really good task assignment, which is great when you're a CrossFitter because it gives you really clear focus around things that are singular. If I wanted to learn handstand push-ups, for instance, or Olympic lifting, like something that had a single modality I could really dig into. The other thing it does is it gives me this sense of disassociation, which sounds like it should be negative, but it actually becomes a positive in the terms of fitness because it takes things that should be scary for me or create anxiety. And when I've already done them, I'm now able to shut my brain off from them. And it makes these repeating tough workouts or benchmark workouts, or hero WODs, like Fran's a good example of one that gives people anxiety. That one actually becomes comforting for me because I've done it so many times. I know what the outcome's going to be, and it allows me to shut my brain off and just do it. On the opposite end of that, or what I would put on the cons list, are the mood swings that come with ADHD. Specifically, depression and anxiety are the two big ones that are really hard to manage, and why it's so important to stay on top of this aspect of your mental health. And then some of the little things that it brings with it are absent-mindedness is a big one. Like, I really struggle to remember names. I think I routinely make the joke that I see people at the gym 5 days a week and can't remember their name. And then it also gives me a real struggle in the late afternoon, like anything past 3 p.m., I am struggling to have mental focus around and really dial in what I need to get done. I often will just forget to return calls or emails because I intend to get to it and then file it away in my brain and don't come back to it until the following morning when my early morning focus comes back. So it's a lot. I've joked around and explained it that it's like having a bag of raccoons in your head at all times. There's just constant noise going on, and being able to hone that noise in and focus it is the hardest and most important part of managing it. And I found 4 or 5 ways that help me do that. They're all interconnected, and I have them in a specific order, although I'm not 100% convinced that they have to be in an order because they are all interconnected. The first one for me when I'm struggling, particularly around the depression and anxiety piece or the mood swings, is cutting out all alcohol altogether. Alcohol impacts everything else on the list I'm going to talk about here, and that's why I always have it at number one. I don't always recommend people to cut things out of their life. I know some of you like to drink, some don't. But for me, the alcohol piece really has zero benefits in relation to managing ADHD. It causes depression. It makes it hard to rest and recover. It destroys your sleep. Nutritionally, it's just not great for you. And I know you could debate some studies around that, but generally speaking, there are not a lot of positive traits that come from alcohol. And I found zero in how it helps you manage ADHD. So cutting it out for me is super important. Now, I find ways to compensate for that to give me the same kind of tactile response, and that helps me cut it out completely. As an example, I was sitting here drinking this hop water and get it in frame. I'm not smart enough to do that. It's a hop water by a company called Voodoo Brewing. It's basically just water that's infused with hops. So it gives it that beer flavor and the same kind of, for lack of a better term, emotional response comes from drinking that you would if you had a beer, but without the alcohol. It tastes good, but allows me to get the same sensation. I also use non-alcoholic beers. This is my favorite, BrewDog. It's got 20 calories, tastes just like beer, but no alcohol. And then for those that don't like the taste of beer or hops, I also will just do simple LaCroix in a rocks glass to give me that sensation that you might get from a vodka tonic or whatever, and allow you to get that same feeling you would get, which is almost a sense of relaxation, but again, without the risk to your recovery and the no hangover and all the negative side effects that come from alcohol. The reason I do that is because the true number one on my list is sleep, and alcohol wrecks that. And without sleep, I cannot manage my ADHD. You have to get enough of it, and that's critically important. So it's really 7 to 8 hours a night that I have to focus on in order to do that, and I just cannot get that done with alcohol. The third thing on my list is nutrition. And again, it ties into the alcohol piece, but I found over the years that the cleaner I eat, the less processed food that I eat, the less food with additives that I put into my body, the better I feel, the better my brain works. And so I really try to limit my nutrition in these moments to the most simplest of terms. I joke around that if the food has more than one ingredient in it, it's probably too much. So it's really as simple as saying lean meats, vegetables, that sort of thing. Things that are easy to digest, that my body doesn't have to spend a ton of time working through so it can recover. And then the fourth one is exercise, which is no shock to anyone here that's a CrossFitter, but there are some real specific things I do around exercise to help me manage it. CrossFit in amongst itself has been super helpful because it allows me to shut my brain off for that 1 hour during the day. And those of us that have ADHD typically are really good at following instruction. We're just doing kind of the singular task that's in front of you, which is why a classroom setting is always good for me. The flip side of that is we often do things that are a little bit too hard or difficult and make it harder for you to recover. And so what I've learned over the years is to do selective scaling. I've learned to make sure I'm taking 2 rest days a week. And honestly, I typically stick to the traditional CrossFit method of 3 days on, rest day, 2 days on, rest day, and so on and so forth. Just rinse and repeat. On those rest days, I'm staying active, might mow the yard, go for a short walk, work around the house, but nothing too strenuous. Again, it's about resting my brain and my body and allowing those two things to connect so I can be fresh again and stay off of those kind of huge swings. And then the last thing is supplements. And I do not take many. I honestly take 2 on a regular basis. Have a few others that I sprinkle in here and there. I'll do an entire separate episode on supplements at some point. But just to give you a simple idea of it, the 2 that I routinely take are vitamin D and creatine. And the creatine is the one that's surprising for most people because I know a lot of people have questions about creatine, but I found that it's been invaluable for brain health. And again, allows me to rest and recover faster. And it takes my mood swings from those huge peaks and valleys that I described earlier to a much more level state. When I'm consistently on creatine, I feel very level. When I'm off of it, those mood swings start to present themselves. And sometimes they're harsh, sometimes they're not at all. But the importance of keeping that level over a long period of time is what really helps me manage through this and not, to go back to my earlier phrase, make it feel like I've got a bag of raccoons in my head at all times. So those are the big five that I look at. Like I mentioned, there's a lot more in between that. I'm going to do further episodes on the sleep, nutrition, exercise, and supplement piece to give you a real sense of how I've dug into those, but there's a ton of research you can do on your own between now and then. I'd love it if you guys have ideas to drop it in the comments, and if this is something you're struggling with or you have questions around the areas that I manage, I'll be happy to address it on future episodes. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys soon.